Jonathan Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, what information has he received about how the New Zealand economy might be affected by the economic and fiscal issues in the United States and Europe?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, there's a clear message from recent events in the US and Europe that these major economies face large challenges stemming from too much debt, and it will take some time to sort out these problems. New Zealand is not immune from the fallout either in financial markets or in terms of the demand for its exports. After all, we're borrowing in the same markets as the indebted countries in Europe, and Europe and the US remain significant export markets for New Zealand. It's a bit hard to judge exactly what impact there would be on New Zealand if there was a significant crisis in the US and Europe, but in the absence of such a crisis, our best information is that New Zealand is relatively well placed to be able to continue to grow moderately even if these large economies find their growth slows down.
Jonathan Young.
To the Minister, what are the attitudes of international lenders in the current global environment?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, I've had the opportunity recently to talk to a range of politicians, credit rating agencies and international banks, and it would be fair to say that they have a fairly gloomy view of economic prospects around the developed world over the next 12 months or so. In fact, I would describe the mood as ugly. Heightened uncertainty in markets means that international lenders and credit rating agencies are increasingly concerned about companies or countries or banks that have significant debt. So while the New Zealand ship is in better shape than it was 2 or 3 years ago, the international waters are becoming choppier.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Given that the Minister has now just confirmed his assessment that the international picture is ugly, and his earlier statement that we can only muddle through, why has he been contradicted by the Prime Minister, who says we can be, quote, reasonably confident of strong growth in quarters 2, 3 and 4 this year, despite quarter 2 being a paltry 0.1%?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, if I can correct the member, actually said the mood was ugly. To go into a bit more detail, it's reasonably clear that America and the US and Europe economies are likely to slow down, and that's reflected in changes in recent international forecasts. However, New Zealand's principal exporting is now done with Australia and China, both of whom have fairly good growth prospects. So I agree with the Prime Minister that New Zealand's growth prospects remain better than most developed countries.
Jonathan Young.
To the Minister, how is New Zealand placed to deal with this increased uncertainty in global financial markets?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're reasonably well placed. We have had a growing economy. We've set a path back to surplus at a time which we will achieve at a time when most countries will still be in deficit and increasing their borrowing. We're reducing New Zealand's overall indebtedness to the rest of the world, which is our largest vulnerability. One measure of this is our net international liabilities, which cover households, business and government. As at June the 30th, 2009, our net international liabilities were 86% of GDP, and as at the June 30th this year, they are just slightly under 70% of GDP, which means that compared to the size of our economy, our total stock of international liabilities is now shrinking, and that's mainly because of changes in the behaviour of New Zealand households who are saving more, and some statistical changes that mean we're measuring New Zealand assets owned in Australia better than we used to.
Jonathan Young.
To the Minister, what other progress has the government made in reducing New Zealand's vulnerability to the current global market environment?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I think the other progress that's been made has been to change the approach of the general machinery of government to ensure that it is focused on value for money. That's taken a couple of years of pretty consistent discussion and policy changes with government departments, but now they understand the need for value for money and have begun the process of making significant changes to ensure that they can deliver more service to the public for less. We've also moved to improve our business environment because, after all, there will only be new jobs when businesses are confident enough to invest, and we're making some progress there as well.
Question number 3, the Honourable David Cunliffe.